Hello. Today we are going to master the different ways to solve quadratic equations. This is a core topic for your IGCSE Extended Mathematics course. In this lesson, we will cover four main areas. First, solving equations that are already factorized. Second, solving by factorizing expressions ourselves. Third, using the quadratic formula for trickier equations. And finally, solving by completing the square to find exact solutions. By the end of this session, you will be able to identify which method is most efficient for any given equation, and solve them to find the exact values of x. Let's start with the simplest case, equations that are already factorized. In an IGCSE paper, you might see something that looks like this. To solve this, we use the null factor law. This states that if two things multiply to give 0, then at least one of them must be 0. So, either the first bracket, x minus 5, is 0, or the second bracket, 2x plus 3, is 0. Now we just solve these two simple linear equations. For the first one, we add 5 to both sides. For the second one, we subtract 3 and then divide by 2. So our solutions are x equals 5 or x equals negative 1.5. Always remember that a quadratic equation typically has two solutions. We have successfully met our first objective. Next, we will learn how to solve equations that aren't factorized yet. In your exam, these often appear as trinomials. Consider the equation x squared minus 7x plus 12 equals 0. To solve this, we need to find two numbers that multiply to give the constant term positive 12 and add to give the coefficient of x, which is negative 7. The numbers negative 3 and negative 4 work perfectly because they multiply to 12 and add to negative 7. We can now write the equation in its factorized form. Just like in our first example, we set each bracket to 0. This gives us x equals 3 and x equals 4. Let's try a slightly harder one where the squared term has a coefficient. Here, we need factors of 2 times negative 3, which is negative 6, that add up to 5. The factors 6 and negative 1 work since 6 times negative 1 is negative 6, and their sum is 5. We split the middle term and factorize by grouping. First, rewrite 5x as 6x minus x. Then we factor out common terms from each pair. This simplifies to the product of two brackets, 2x minus 1 and x plus 3. Setting each bracket to 0 gives us our final answers. So, our final solutions are x equals 0.5 or x equals negative 3. We have now mastered solving by factorization. Sometimes, a quadratic equation cannot be easily factorized. If an IGCSE question asks you to give your answer to 2 decimal places, it is a huge hint to use the quadratic formula. Our learning objective is to solve quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. The formula works for any quadratic in this standard form. X squared plus bx plus c equals 0. This looks intimidating, but it is just a matter of substitution. The formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Let's look at a typical exam-style question. Solve 3x squared plus 2x minus 7 equals 0. First, identify your constants. A is 3, b is 2, and c is negative 7. Be very careful with the signs. Here, c is negative 7. Now, let's plug these into the formula. We get x equals negative 2, plus or minus the square root of 2 squared minus 4 times 3, times negative 7, all divided by 2 times 3. Inside the square root, we have 2 squared, which is 4, and negative 4 times 3 times negative 7, which is positive 84. This simplifies to x equals negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 88. All over 6. Now we split this into two calculations, one for the plus and one for the minus. And for the minus calculation, rounding to 2 decimal places, our solutions are 1.23 and negative 1.90. We've now met our third objective. Finally, let's look at solving equations by completing the square. This method is often required in IGCSE extended papers when you are asked for an exact solution involving surds. We will solve the equation x squared minus 6x minus 2 equals 0. To complete the square, we look at the first two terms. We take half of the coefficient of x, which is negative 3, and put it inside a squared bracket with x. If we expanded this, we would get x squared minus 6x plus 9. But our equation only has x squared minus 6x, so we must subtract that extra 9. Now, combine the constant terms. To solve for x, we first move the 11 to the other side. Next, take the square root of both sides. Remember to include both the positive and negative roots. Finally, add 3 to both sides to isolate x. These are our exact solutions: x equals 3 plus root 11, and x equals 3 minus root 11. If the question doesn't ask for decimals, leave them in this surd form. Let's recap what we've learned about quadratic equations. 1. Null factor law for factorized forms. 2. Grouping or trinomials for factorizing. 3. Quadratic formula for decimals. And 4. Completing the square for exact surd values. You have now covered all the primary ways to solve quadratic equations for your IGCSE. Great job!